Alright, so I played a game recently called Professor of Magical Studies. I'd recommend it. It's really good, especially the beginning, although I do think it takes a bit of a dip at times, and especially right before the few ends and scenes take place. Still, overall it's very solid. What is it about? Well, you'll never guess, but it involves magic and teaching it. Which doesn't sound awfully interesting, but it manages to deliver a compelling story and not stray too far from the real depiction of the teaching profession. What did I like? First, the opening scene. It's delivered in a very confusing way, at least at first, but it ends up being a sophisticated character creation screen, for all intents and purposes. I really loved it, especially the plot twist, which I won't spoil. This prologue plays out like this. There's a short scene of a player walking onto campus as an adult, a newly hired professor, then a magic pattern triggers and it's a scene from back in the day. Why am I stumbling so much, goddammit? So the scene plays from back in the day, then he was still a student. And then there's a scene of the aftermath of whatever happened in the past affecting the now. Honestly, if the whole game was just this opening scene, I'd complain that it was too short, but it would still work on its own as a game. This reminds me of Witchcraft U and some other games like this, although there is obviously just a student story. This jumping around was something I disliked, but then it clicked and it was like playing Divinity Original Sin and getting out of for joy. And I just audibly asked, there is more? Well, it's not quite that good, but nothing really is. Second is something difficult to grasp, but I have to point it out anyway, the co-workers. And specifically the only other peer of the same age. I'll avoid the name because it spoils the opening scene, but I'll just say that this character is written to be the most frustrating asshole using everyone and getting in their way. Every single damn time. And it's so believable. I can just imagine a whole bunch of people like that in real life, who'd stop at nothing to further their position. Doesn't matter how competent they are, doesn't matter who they have to step over, ends justify the means. I hated that character with a passion. But just like any workplace, it's not like it was possible to get rid of them. That was so goddamn realistic. It also made me think of Vampire the Masquerade Night Road, and how Julian, a character in that game, keeps popping up everywhere, every 5 seconds, regardless how much I clicked the option to tell him to to go away. I'm trying to cut down on the swearing, but that little bastard kept popping up again and again. In Professor of Magical Studies it's the same thing, but here it actually makes bloody sense. Because they are a co-worker, you can't really go away, they work there. It makes so much more sense, it's done so much better. Actually, everyone on the faculty is kinda like that. There is absent-minded paranoid dummy who should have retired decades ago. A demented asshole who is demeaning to everyone, but might have had a brilliant research in the past and present, no spoilers. A middle-of-the-road douche playing pranks and acting like the heart of the party, yet everyone hates him, but doesn't care enough to show it, yada yada yada. Absolutely everyone is someone I can just imagine in a workplace. It's not a group of people I can imagine working together and hating every minute of it, yet being unable to do anything about it. I just can't stop gushing. Also, I enjoyed the idea of magic itself. Generally it's saying abracadabra out loud or focusing the power from within or something equally silly. Here it's something different. Magic is weird in this world in that it's done through pattern. A person focuses on a particular pattern for a while and then magic happens. Games did this in the past, for example, Disciples 2 comes to mind, and probably a few others, but yeah. For now, I just remember Disciples had those runes for dwarves and the weird circular pattern for most other races. There are this specific kind of drawings for every kind of spell, and all of them look very different depending on the race. Owl House, the Western animated series, also did something like this. So the idea is not completely unique, but it's still a bit more rare and more interesting to me. There are obvious drawbacks, there are blatant problems with the effectiveness, and it's not so simple that just everyone can do it. In this world, it would actually make sense for an old guy with a giant grey beard to be a powerful mage, unlike the usual, where it's just everyone can do it, and there's no drawbacks, and it's perfectly effective, and there's no reason not to be a mage, just this is not the same. And there's also a small point I'd mention, visitor, let's call it that. It's a spoiler, but it doesn't really change anything whether the player knows it's coming or not. So, spoiler. At one point, there's an entity from another dimension which makes the player's character mind their home, and from then on, there is a relationship they can foster with them. I enjoyed it, especially the strange quirk of adapting the phrases without really knowing the meaning. It's a fairly important character, all things considered, but it didn't elicit strong enough feelings from me. I'm just saying that it was mildly amusing. What did I dislike? First, I'd like to make a petty complaint and spoil some more stuff. The intrinsic pattern. So at one point there is an option to get a pattern basically etched within a player's mind, so it could be used at any time instead of needing papers with patterns drawn or leather or whatever, it doesn't matter. The drawback is what too many intrinsic patterns can make the person senile. Anyway, so I picked a pattern for dampen magic. Basically dispel. It worked exactly once in the whole game. The game offers an option to use it a bunch of times, yet it only really worked once. And since it's not tied to any stat, means that it's not really ever gonna work in any situation. Meaning it's useless 90% of the time. This was extremely infuriating. It's like giving a player in an RPG an option to control time and then saying that it only works once in the blue moon for a couple of seconds at that, and oh, it leaves them in a coma for a month. This was extremely maddening. Aside from that, the beginning comes in strong. Then there's a bit of a routine that gets set up. Work piles up, the player is tasked with deciding what gets priority, yada yada yada. Then a couple of events occur which disrupt all of that. And that's when it feels like writing takes a dip. I'm assuming it's one of those branch and path issues, meaning the writer would have to essentially double the word count, if not more, to account for every single choice. So they've had to somewhat downscale and more or less railroad the player into certain events. So it's unclear how much time actually passes between each page. I'm pretty sure I was offered to work on a symposium maybe twice. And I picked it only once, because there was some more pressing matters to attend to. And after a while the game gives a very blatant, "Lol, you messed up, now your contributions to this event basically be ignored and all the glory goes to another member of a faculty." Now, this is mutual exclusivity, I get that. But this felt like it came out of complete left field. I didn't feel like I made a choice, I felt like I was presented with, okay, look, this house is on fire, and you can save some people from there. Or, you should probably clean up some trash in your apartment, it's been piling up for a while. And those are the only choices. I don't know about you, but I know what I am picking. This isn't what it felt like. I barely had time to do anything in the middle. I couldn't talk to an old friend, couldn't discuss something more about the magic with a magical corporation, couldn't do much of anything. This game just needed to rush, and unless I pick and choose only this one thing every single time, then screw me. It's a very, and I do mean very common problem with these kinds of games. They have to first force exclusivity, without really making it clear that it is exclusive or why it is exclusive. The player character basically has a random number, let's say 5 days in a year to do stuff, and the rest of the year, well, it just happens. Something is going on during that time, but who cares about that? Sometimes there's a half-assed explanation, sometimes like now, it's just brushed aside until the end, where it just slaps the player with, "You messed up by not doing this." I'll just stop repeating myself. It's a very difficult thing to nail, and I can remember 2 games which really didn't make me feel like it took a choice from me. It was Choice of Magic and Parliament of Knives. The exclusivity in those games actually made sense, and it really felt like the game actually occurs only over a small period of time, while Professor of Magical Studies is supposed to be over a year, and you have no time to work on anything over the course of that year. There's also a small problem with money. There is a money stat, which seems important at first, but then it gets forgotten completely less than halfway through the game. I don't get why you even have it. It's like you offered a couple of options to use the money early on, but again, it shows up in the stats, and then you are never offered to do anything with it. Just nothing. Again, small complaint, but I almost forgot about it. And lastly, again, it's not very important, but it's a personal pet peeve. Romance. I don't know what is wrong with people and why we need to add romance in these kinds of games. Maybe there's some bizarre checklist the publisher asks for making the game. Must have 500 questions about sexuality, gender, and some other crap. And then there were some of these here too. And it was presented as if there's something wrong with me, but I didn't want to literally jump on the first dick I see. I don't goddamn care. Leave me alone. I don't understand why this crap needs to be forced down my throat every single game. Some games just have the opt-out option. Others just don't write it. And there are also some where romance is like this hidden optional thing which disappears if you blink. But sadly this is one of those where the game actively reprimands the player if they say no. What a load of crap. But like I said, I can remember it happening twice, maybe 3 times, so it's not like the entire game is centered around that. It's easy to ignore, it's just that it happens so often in these games I have to bitch about it. So overall, I'd say this is very good. Well written, ends with everything explained, and all the characters get their send-off, even if not all satisfying, and in a strange way the magical story is somehow bitterly realistic in how it wraps up. The teacher goes on their merry way far into the sunset, while the students reflect and think about the impact they've left behind. And I am envious of Gabriel. Damn gifted kids. They took our jobs!